Hello and welcome to another flying video with Flight Level 180. This is the first of a different kind of video that I'm going to be doing, and in each of these videos I'm going to be looking at one of the four types of airplanes that I fly on a regular basis. And this first one is going to be about the Cessna 172. In the photo here you can see it. This is a Cessna 172 SP. I believe it's around a 2000 model, so it's 23 or so years old. This is actually the latest model they make, though it doesn't have the most upgraded avionics. It's a 180 horsepower engine. It has a horizontally opposed fuel injected engine, and you're going to see it shows some wear and tear from 23 years of flying and usage. And this is not what you see in Flight Simulator. You're going to see some of the the paint chips and some of the issues, some of the dust and everything else in the airplane. And this is this is what you really should expect to see when you go out and fly real world airplanes, because they get used. So we're going to look at the outside, we're going to look at the cowling, we're going to look at the propeller, and we're going to look at the control surfaces, we're going to look at the antennas, and then we're going to go inside and look at the interior spaces. We're going to look at the seats, we're going to look at the baggage area, and then we'll look at the panel. And hopefully it'll give you a good sense of what you can expect when you get into, if you're getting into real world flying. So let's jump in and start looking at the videos. Let's start by looking at the front of the airplane, and this is the cowling. If you look at the wheel fairings, you can see there's a bit of oil on them, not really surprising. And then as you slide over here, we can look at the prop, and this is a fixed pitch prop. You can't change the angle of attack on the prop, so you have to change the speed of the prop by changing the engine power. And looking over here on the top of the cowling, you can see this little door, and this is the oil access door, and you can pop it open, and there's a stick in here. We'll go ahead and pull this out. You unscrew this, and then it gives you access. You can look at the base of the stick to see how much oil is in there, and you can see the limits there on the door, and you pretty much can add oil there. And if you look down in this hole, you can't really see much. There's the mag, but it's really hard to check the engine, because you can see the entire cowling is screwed down, so there's no way to pop it open like you could in a Bonanza. Moving over to the right, you can see the exhaust pipe right there, and then there's an air filter that clears out the induction air as it comes into the engine. Let's slide over and look at the left wing. And the first obvious feature you see on high wing airplanes is a strut, and this is a diagonal bar that gives the strength and stability to the wing, as opposed to a spar which passes through the fuselage. And you can see some vent holes here that pass air into the cabin, and over here you can see the pitot tube, and this in conjunction with the static port gives you airspeed. And there's a little drain hole in the back of that, and it's a heated pitot tube there. And let's slide up here a little bit to the right, and you can look at the stall warning horn. On Cessnas it's an innie that works off suction, I believe. And on most other airplanes, it's a little flap that's an outie, and it usually goes off about 16 degrees of angle of attack. And then sliding over a bit, there is the landing light and the taxi light, and there's really not much else on the rest of the wing. And as we look over here at the right wing, there's not as much to see. Pitot tube and such forth is on the left side, but you can see some inboard air vents. But if you look up to the top of the wing, you can see one of the fuel caps for the in-wing tanks, and you can see one all the way over there on the other wing. So there's two tanks that are gravity fed, and then you can see some GPS and other antennas up there, along with a grasshopper. Let's take a peek at the back of the wing. This is the right wing, and you can see first here these little things are static wicks, and they dissipate static electricity. And then this is the aileron. I have it locked down with a control lock, but you should be able to move that freely once you remove the lock. And right here you can see the split between the ailerons and the flaps. You can see the flaps are a little bigger, and they move with a switch in the cockpit, and they'll lower to 10 degrees, 20 degrees, and 30 degrees. And they reduce your stall speed a little bit and allow you to come in a little bit more steeply for landing. So very useful items and necessary. Now let's go ahead and move back to the rear of the airplane. First off, we have this, we're right behind the passenger area, and that is an ELT antenna, and that is, ELT system will activate when you have a crash in theory, though they don't work especially well. Up here you can see it's an SP Skyhawk, and if you look up at the top of the tail, let's go ahead and spoon up here a little bit, and you can see there's a beacon antenna, that red one, so that's a rotating light. And then you see a couple more comm antennas on the back of the rudder. You can see a static wick, so those are pretty much over most of the airframe. And then we have the rudder here, so that allows you to slew the nose right and left using the rudder pedals. And over here we have the horizontal stabilizer, and you can see the paint's pretty badly chipped, but it's still functional. And that is on the back here. We have the elevator. So the elevator is controlled by the forward and back movement of the stick and allows you to move the nose up and down in the airplane, increase or decrease your pitch. And you can see there, like the attachment points where they attach, it's actually locked down, so I can't move it because of the control lock. But if you look there, this is the trim tab, and that works off the trim wheel, which we'll see in a bit, and allows you to adjust the pressure you feel on the control yoke in the pitch dimension. So it's very, very important to get good at using that so you don't wear yourself out. Now let's jump back over to the tires. If you'll notice on this airplane, it has wheel pants, which are essentially fairings that improve the quality of the airflow over the wheels. This, you wouldn't think would make that much of a difference, but it adds 5 or 10 knots to the cruise speed of an airplane to have wheel pants versus not having it. And it's a great feature. Now, trainers, they typically pull these off because, you know, it makes the airplane harder to fly when things are happening faster when you're going fast. So typically trainers don't have wheel pants. This airplane will hit about 115 knots in low pressure cruise, so it's a pretty good performer overall. Looking here at the left side of the fuselage, right in the middle, you see the static port, and this drives the altimeter, the vertical speed indicator, and in conjunction with the pitot tube, the airspeed indicator. And you can see there's a little hole in there that goes into the static system. So an important feature of the airplane, you want to make sure that's not blocked. Just forward of the static port, you can find the baggage door. It's not very big, and you pop it open just by pushing this little button right here, and then we can see inside. It's pretty small space. There's not a lot of room there. You know, you can see some documents, and there's the tow bar for pulling it, and some covers for the air inlets in the front. But that's generally it. You know, there's room to put a couple suitcases and not much else, but it's there. Now, one nice feature about the 172 is it has 2 doors, one on the passenger and one on the pilot side. And you just pull that little handle open and there you are. And let's start by looking at the back seat. You can see some nice leather seats, pretty comfortable, and nice 3-point harnesses, which is really a nice feature. A lot of airplanes don't have that. And if you look, there's a little room for your legs, but not a lot. So if the seats are back. Now let's take a look at the inside of the airplane. This is the instrument panel, and you can see there's the usual array of instruments, and this is the control lock. So this is what was preventing me from moving into control surfaces. And once we remove it, you can move the controls easily. So pull backwards and forwards for pitch, like that, and then side to side, left and right, banks the wings left and right to turn. And over here, if you look at the stack in the middle, there is a transponder at the bottom, a comm radio in the middle, and then the top large one is a GNS 750. It's a GPS device, and I will go ahead and turn that on for you so you can see how that looks. Now I have the GNS 750 turned on for you, and it's a really impressive piece of equipment. It has radios, it has traffic, it has navigation and planning features. You can see it says no GPS position because we're in a hangar, but you know, you would be able to see exactly where you are based on that panel. And you can see it powers these navigation needles over on the left side, those two on the right. So it's a really capable piece of equipment. If you want to buy one new and insert it into your airplane, it's probably approaching $15,000 to $20,000. So it's not a very cheap piece of equipment, but it's incredibly capable. And to turn it off, you just turn off the master switch right here after you turn off the avionics switch. Sliding over to the left of the yoke, you'll find the engine gauges. And on the top left, those are the fuel gauges, and 26 gallons per tank. And you can see with the power off, they show empty, but when you flip on the battery masters, that will show the correct, well, hopefully correct amount of fuel in the airplane. The right gauge on the top is the EGT gauge. On the left side, that is the exhaust gas temperature, and that's a super useful tool for leaning and setting engine power. And it's much better if you have EGT for all 4 cylinders, but in this airplane we only have 1. On the right side of that is a fuel flow, so it goes up to 19 gallons per hour, and you cruise around 8 gallons per hour. Bottom right, amperage, that should be about 0 or slightly above 0 to indicate a charge on the battery. Vacuum system on the left, which the vacuum system powers the gyroscopic instruments like the attitude indicator. Left side, the oil pressure, which needs to be in the green, and the oil temperature was a proxy for how hot the engine is. And usually you want to see that in the green, though it's better to have a CHT gauge. We don't have one in this airplane. Now let's look at the primary control instruments in the airplane. This is called the 6-pack, and it's a very traditional layout for a non-glass cockpit airplane. On the top left, you have the indicator, and this is driven by the pitot tube system. In the middle, you have a gyroscopic instrument, the attitude indicator, and it is driven by a engine-driven vacuum pump. On the right side, you have the altimeter, which runs off of the static system, as does the vertical speed indicator, which is underneath it. In the middle in the bottom row is the directional gyro, and this is also driven by the same engine-driven vacuum pump. And it tends to creep over time through precessions, so you check it every 15 minutes or so against the compass on the dash, and then adjust it to make sure it matches perfectly. On the left side, you have the turn coordinator. And on the top, there's a little airplane to show whether your wings are level or banked left or right. And on the bottom, there is the ball. And you need to make sure this is in the center at most times versus being in a slip or a skid. And to stay in coordinated flight, which is the safest way to fly, you really want to have that ball right in the middle. Dropping down to the right of the yoke, you can find the throttle and mixture. And the left 2 buttons, the black ones, are just lighting controls, but this is the throttle, and you can see you can push it in for more power or pull it out for less power. Over here on the right is the mixture control, which controls the fuel flow, and that has a button that locks it down, so if you push the button in, you can slide the mixture in for big movements, or you can rotate a little bit at a time. That's turning it clockwise gives more fuel, and turn it counterclockwise is less fuel. Then you have the flap control. You can see 10, 20, and 30 degrees. And then you have some more environmental controls for the temperature of the cabin. Moving towards the floor, you can see the rudder pedals over there on the left. And you can also see the trim control. And this is a little wheel that moves up and down. You just move with your fingers. And that pushes the nose down, and going the other direction pulls the nose up. So you basically center it for takeoff, and that basically trims off pressure on the stick. Now over here you have a microphone. This is something you never use. It's a handheld microphone from the old days. And scrolling down to the bottom, you have the fuel shutoff. That's the red knob. And down below that you have the fuel control, which tank the fuel feeds from. So you can set it to the left, the right, or the middle, which is both. On the ground, you use right or left so the fuel doesn't port between the 2 tanks. And when you're in flight, you typically put it on both, so it drains from both tanks at the same time. And the last thing I want to show you on the outside of the plane are the fuel sumps. And you can see here there's little tiny holes that you actually stick a metal pin into, and it drains into a cup, a clear plastic cup, and there's actually 5 of them, as you see I'm pointing them all out there, that allows you to see if the fuel has water in it or if it has impurities of some sort. So very important to actually sump those. There are 5 on each wing and 2 underneath the body of the airplane, underneath the engine. And that's it for the overview of the 172 SP. I hope you found that interesting. I'm also going to do an overview of a Cherokee 160, of a Beechcraft Debonair, which is essentially a Bonanza, and a 182 Cessna. So I think you'll find those interesting as well. Stay tuned for those, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Flight Level 180 signing off.